Alright, hey, I'm here to talk to you today about The Stand by Stephen King. It's a big fat boy, as you can see. Took forever to read. So just a couple things to know about The Stand. It was originally published in 1978. When he first submitted it, his publisher was like, look, this is too long, it'll be too expensive, so they made him cut a bunch of stuff. The hardcover original version was 823 pages long. In 1990, Stephen King went back and decided to go through and see what he wanted to put back in, because he's Stephen King and he can do that now. So this is the complete and uncut edition, so that's the one I'm talking about. You can buy old editions, I think, but the only ones currently being printed, I think, are this complete and uncut version. Besides being longer, I believe it also updates when the events of the story take place from the early 80s to the early 90s. I believe that's true. Obviously, I haven't read the other version of it, so I don't know. This version, the one I'm holding, is 1,154 pages long, so it is substantially longer. He took a long book and made it even longer. We'll get into this, but I don't think that was necessarily the best choice. But again, I haven't read the original version of it. So if you don't know, this is Stephen King's, considered probably his masterpiece, his Magnum Opus. It was his fourth novel, coming off Carrie, Salem's Lot, The Shining, and then The Stand. It's post-apocalyptic. It follows a group of people, all sorts of different people from all over the country, in the aftermath of a super flu outbreak. So basically I think like the first 200 pages of this book is showing how the flu, which was a flu that was being developed as a biological weapon, was whatever precautions the military was taking failed, and it got out, and then it shows you how it spreads kind of throughout the country. They talk about not really knowing what happened to the rest of the world, but for sure in America, it's either 99% or 99.4% of the population was just wiped out. It's basically a super flu that it adapts faster than your body can, so your body can never learn to fight it off. They never figure out exactly why the small percentage of people were immune to it, because those people didn't get sick and then get better. They never got sick at all. So they call it the super flu, or Captain Trips. And then, as you imagine, most of the people who knew about it died, so there really isn't much of an explanation. So the majority of the book follows these different characters from their starting points through this journey, through this empty kind of America, and then they end up coalescing. This is a little spoilery, but it tells you this on the back of the book, so whatever. They basically end up coalescing into two camps, one in Las Vegas and one in Boulder, Colorado. And the book is billed as this epic struggle to fill the vacuum left by the destruction of society, good versus evil. And that's set up with the figures of Mother Abigail, who's a 108-year-old woman who's very godly and goes to church. She ends up being the figure for the people in Boulder. And then you have Randall Flagg, a.k.a. the Dark Man, a.k.a. the Walking Dude. He's sort of like a Satan-y demon thing. They don't really explain it. I know he pops up in throughout Stephen King's other stuff, like the Dark Tower stuff, and I think Eyes of the Dragon. He comes in, but basically he's the bad guy, and he's kind of like the embodiment of evil. So he comes up and he influences people. So it is a novel that is definitely about the journey versus the destination. I was entertained for most of it. There are a bunch of characters. Stephen King legitimately does a good job of making each character feel distinct, and there are a ton of them. I think there's something like 10 main characters and numerous characters that come up and go away, but they all feel very distinct and have their own personalities, tics, and voices, and you really get to get inside the head of them. A little bit Game of Thrones-ish. You don't know who's safe and who's not. It definitely isn't a novel where all the good guys are going to make it through to the end. And in that way, I think it keeps it interesting. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. So it's successful in that. It does do a really good job. I could see where people think boring reading about the spread of the flu, but I think it does a really good job of showing you how easily and how quickly these things could spread. And for me, it was really terrifying because when I started reading it, I got a cold. And so here I am getting sick, reading about people getting sick and dying. So that was extra terrifying. But ultimately, the problem I have, the writing was fine. Stephen King still at his prime, and he's not a caricature of himself. It's entertaining. It flows well. All these characters feel distinct. There are some very dynamic moments in the book, very horrific moments. There's humor. There's levity. So all that's there. My problem is the ending. It really seems like Stephen King. First, there are several characters who are introduced and killed off who are seemingly much more important than they really are, and I feel like he fell in love with them as ideas, but they didn't need to be there. And they add a lot of time and length to a story that doesn't need any more time or length. So that's an issue. The other issue is the actual ending, the climax. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it, although, I mean, we're talking about a book that came out in 1978, so that's on you. But it just, to me, and you can disagree with me in the comics, I don't know, I hated the climax, the confrontation. It rang false to me. It seemed very contrived and quick, and for all the build-up and all the kind of realness of the situation, it was so over the top, like Deus Ex Machina, kind of like this very convenient sort of ending that happens very quickly, and it doesn't feel like they earned it. It just feels like it sort of happened, and then it resolves literally everything. There are like no problems after that, or at least not to the same scale that there were before. So I don't know. I feel like he wrote this journey, and it's a great journey. But then when it came to wrapping it all up, he kind of shit his pants on that. Definitely very rough. So ultimately, I think it's well worth reading. It's a long book. I read it over 2 summers. Basically, I read for a couple weeks. One summer, I sat it down. Then I read for a couple weeks the next summer and finished it. So I just finished it a couple weeks ago. It was really entertaining. There are a lot of good parts. If you could find the older, more condensed version, I might go with that, because I feel like that would cut away a lot of stuff that you don't really need, and I think Stephen King indulged himself on a little. But even so, it's still a really good book. It's worth reading. Just go into it knowing that it's about the journey, not the conclusion, because the conclusion really let me down. Now, a couple weeks later, I don't feel so bad about it. I still feel like it was a good, enjoyable read. But at the time when I got to the conclusion, I was pissed. You could ask my girlfriend. I just had to put the book down and look at her for like 10 minutes, just be like, I don't, what is this? So anyway, check it out. Let me know in the comments down there what your thoughts were, if you've read it, or if you are interested in reading something this long. Also wanted to say hello. I plan on making videos more regularly now that my schedule is kind of normalized, so it shouldn't be too difficult. So hopefully, if you haven't seen me in forever and you've given up on my channel, keep checking back. Hoping to get a video done each week. So anyway, hi guys, good to be back. Hopefully I see you more often. Peace.